Hello everyone and welcome back to Full House Sports here with myself Charlie for episode 3 of Calcio Corner, where I talk all things Serie A and Italian football in general. And I'm rocking the old school Juventus track jacket, despite the fact that they left me with egg on their face, or egg on my face I should say, last week. I did say Juventus were one of the most entertaining teams to watch in Europe. They're just drawn 4-4 with Borussia Dortmund. They're just beaten into Milan 4-3. I thought surely against Verona the floodgates would open and they would score goal after goal. Anyone who quickly Googles the answer would see that they drew 1-1 with Verona. I gave Hellas Verona the kiss of death and they proved me wrong. Gift Orban, remember him, scored a penalty, in the 44th minute after Francisco Conceição had opened the score in the 19th minute. And Juventus played out a rather dull, although they had their chances, 1-1 draw, which shows that Igor Tudor's team are still a work in progress. Now, this weekend, they lock horns with Atalanta, a team who have been a bit of a nuisance to Juventus in recent seasons. Ivan Juric's men got another win at the weekend against Torino, 3-0. Kuskovic got a double, and Sulemana in a first half blitz on Torino, which led them to win the game 3-0. Both sides are in European action on midweek. Juventus are going away to Villarreal. Atalanta are playing Club Brugge at home. Will they potentially have one eye on that fixture? Igor Tudor today has confirmed that Francisco Conceição will not be available for the Juventus game against Atalanta on Saturday, so they're going to be without him. I also wanted to talk a little bit about Tudor's press conference because I thought it was quite interesting, his comments surrounding Cambiasso. He stated that the young left-back, who has been one of the real standouts of this early season Juventus reinvigoration, I guess, and he said about him maybe going to Liverpool or Man City and Barcelona, and it saddened me, really, hearing the Juventus manager say things like that. It really did, because here you've got Juventus, who are the old lady. They're one of the grand old clubs of not just the Italian football, but European football. And you've got their manager talking about maybe selling players onto other clubs. Does that not show how broken the system is? Really? How broken is the system? That a club like Juventus are going, yeah, he's great, he's a young Italian player, but we don't think we can keep him. That's sad. Really sad. And it angered me, to be honest. It really did. Because, again, it just shows where football is. And where Italian football is, unfortunately. Where they've not got the big money, and they're not necessarily able to compete with other teams in Europe, the bigger sides of Europe. I say bigger. Man City are never in a million years bigger than Juventus, let's have it right. But they're not able to compete financially with them. And I thought that was a real shame. I think Saturday's game, you never know with Juventus at the minute. Like I said that they were one of the most entertaining teams in Europe. I don't know where they are. I don't know where they are now. Are they trying to maybe change that? Has Tudor looked at it and gone, we can't keep conceding as many goals as we are, and with that has lessened the focus on the attacking and the goal-scoring threat? Atalanta have won back-to-back games in Serie A. Obviously, in between that, sandwiched in between that, was the loss to PSG, the comprehensive defeat. But they're probably going to look at it and say maybe things are getting under a groove. I saw Tudor as well said about Ivan Juric, said he's underappreciated. I would agree. I think even Juric is underappreciated as a manager. And perhaps I was critical at the start of the season, saying that he was not what Atalanta needed. I still don't think he was what Atalanta needed, to be honest with you. I think after Gasperini, they needed a young manager that was going to bring them forward. But they haven't necessarily got that. They've got sort of the steady hand. But he is that. He's steady. And he's going to keep the ticket over. They're probably aiming realistic this year for Europa League. Still aiming maybe for top 4. But I think that might be unlikely with the teams around them. It'll be an interesting game. 5 o'clock kickoff on Saturday for both sides. Like I said, both are in European action. Will they have one eye on that? Certainly Atalanta will probably be looking at it and thinking a game against Bruges at home. Can they afford to lose the Champions League? Probably not. They can't afford to lose again. So they're going to be looking at that maybe with one eye on that and looking at not risking players. Juventus obviously opened up that thrilling draw against Dortmund. They're going to be looking at the Villarreal game going away there. Villarreal are quite an informed side at the moment. They might have one eye on that, which can sometimes lead to teams almost having not a gentleman's agreement as such, but something similar to that where they sort of go, look, we're both in European action. Let's not go for the kill on each other here. Might go the other way, of course. Both teams might want to heat up, and both teams are going to play attacking, expansive football. You think Juventus are still going to do that. I think still defensively they're very leaky. And it'll be interesting to see. I'm looking forward to seeing what Cambias does. Vlahovic, I see Man United and Chelsea are apparently back sniffing around. He's always linked with the move away. There's nothing new with that. You know, the man's had... He's one of them players who you keep looking at thinking he's still there. He's still at Juventus. It's unbelievable. But I read this morning that, yeah, Man United and Chelsea. Like I said, no Conceição for Juventus. That'll be a big miss. But Yildiz is going to play, and as is Vlahovic, and as are many of the other stars. But that is a big one to look forward to. That kicks off on Saturday. Well, it doesn't actually kick off on Saturday. Kicks off on Saturday is Como versus Cremonese. Cremonese, who are still unbeaten. 4 games, 2 wins, 2 draws. No Jamie Vardy, no Party. Not that certainly was the case last time out with a 0-0 draw, which was before that another 0-0 draw. They're a side who look defensively solid, which is really important if they realistically want to stay up. I think now they're probably looking in an awkward position to go, well, what are our realistic aims? Will we see Vardy? We're yet to know. It wasn't a serious injury that he sustained. The club said that he was just suffering a minor strain in training, perhaps adapted to a new environment, perhaps adapted to new training methods. He is, let's not forget, you know, close to 40 than he is to 30. And perhaps that's something that's factored into this. Como, we say it every week, playing some of the most attractive football in Europe. There's no doubt about that. They will look at this and probably go, this is really where we're going. They are at home. I think it's going to be a tough game for them, though. I think they're going to find it hard to break Cremonese down, and Cremonese are a threat on the counter-attack. I could see this one maybe as well being another draw for Cremonese and then maintaining this unbelievable unbeaten start. Whether Vardy plays or not, you don't know. Like I said, they've also got Franco Vasquez. They've got Sanabria as well. They're a side who have got strength in depth, which I think is really important as well for a club coming up. They've signed well, and it'll be interesting to see when Vardy does come on, when he finally breaks that duck, what can happen there. Now, talking of newly promoted sides, huge game on Sunday at 2 o'clock. Pisa, up from Serie B, take on their Tuscan rivals, Fiorentina. Yes, Pisa fans will probably say our biggest rivals are Livorno, but often Pisa fans and Fiorentina fans will say that the real hatred is between these two sides. Pisa were dumped out of the Coppa Italia midweek by Torino. Juan Cuadrado was sent off. Cesar Casadei, remember him, Chelsea fans, scoring the one and only goal for Torino. Alarm bells may be ringing around Pisa and Alberto Gilardino's side. I think they are probably looking at Sassuolo, the start they've made. I know they lost to Inter, but they created chance on Sunday. That was a great game, by the way. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. But I think they're going to be looking around now and saying, ooh, we need to start picking up points. Obviously, they've quite publicly recruited experienced players. I say it every week, Cuadrado, Albiol. They've also, of course, got Mbayozola, who's on loan from Fiorentina. I don't think he's going to be able to play on Sunday against his parent club. You would think that would be the case anyway. They're a team that are, you know, I think tried to stay up. Obviously, that's a stupid statement, but I think they tried to stay up, but potentially bringing in all these new players. We see it a lot, I think, now. I think it's becoming a bit of an ongoing trend in clubs who get promoted, certainly the top 5 leagues in Europe, where they bring in a raft of players. And you sometimes just think, just stick to what you had. Stick to what was working. Obviously, Gilardino is returning back to Fiorentina, club he made 118 appearances for. So that's going to be big as well for him. It'll be interesting to see the reception he gets. Fiorentina start their Conference League campaign. Of course, UEFA do this weird staggered start now to the competition. So you're going to have Champions League and Europa League and Conference League starting up on Thursday night. It's competition, of course. They've reached the final twice lost twice. First to West Ham, then to Olympiacos. Surely third time lucky. I think they are, again, unbelievably, one of the favourites for that competition. I know the English representative is Crystal Palace. Sorry about that from a Forest fan. And it'll be interesting to see what they think. They're definitely going to be one of the favourites. Like I say, you've got Palace in there. I know Shakhtar have dropped down to that level of competition as well. They're a threat. You know, they've been Champions League regulars for a fair few seasons now. Aberdeen in there for Scotland. I'm not saying they're going to win it, but, you know, they've got European pedigree. But for Fiorentina, I do think it's a real chance this year, and it's something I'd love to see them do. I'd love to see them win the Conference League after all the heartbreak that they've had. With Pioli in charge, I wouldn't put it past them. I think it's a high possibility that they could get to the latter stages again and then do the ghosts of the past play up. Like I say, big rivalry in Tuscany, really big. Pisa do have a rivalry in Livorno. Of course, Fiorentina, as with every other club in Italy, cannot stand Juventus. But it'll be interesting to see what happens when the two get together. Moise Kean is still in reasonably good form. Can he potentially get a goal against Pisa? How good would it be for Pisa to get their first Serie A win of the season against their rivals at their home stadium? Sunday's action as well sees, I said this last week and I'll say it again, it always sees two what you feel like a massive clubs clashing. And Sunday night's showpiece is nonetheless massive. Milan at the San Siro play host to Napoli. Allegri versus Conte. Modric versus McTominay. They reel off the tongue. It is going to be a fantastic game. It's a game where I think Milan are more than capable of upsetting Napoli. Napoli conceded 2 to Pisa on Monday. Yes, they would argue that the game was gone by the time that they conceded their second, but they're not. I keep saying this, they're not clicking just yet, and I still think that there's still a loss in them. They're not at their full free-flow best. They're still figuring things out. Milan, of course, found themselves in Coppa Italia second round or third round action, I should say, midweek. That's something they've not had for a while, but with a lack of European football, that's where they find themselves. They beat Lecce, and Gunku scored out with the red balloons. He came off the bench as well at the weekend. You forget, I think, with Milan, some of the players that they've recruited, and they have got a very solid squad. And yes, there was the hiccup on the opening weekend against Cremonese, but since then they've gradually been building. And I do think with Modric, with Nkunku, you forget as well Santiago Jimenez, who they signed from Feyenoord last January, and what felt like a bit of a Champions League or bust move for them when they were in Europe, try and get to the last stages of that. They've got a strong squad. They really have. And I think that they are potentially started to get. I thought Udinese might offer more of a threat than they did last Sunday. They didn't. Milan, of course, put 3 past them. They're scoring goals. They're not conceding. That's pretty typical of a Max Allegri side. Max Allegri sides don't tend to concede many goals. I think a hostile San Siro against Napoli, who as well will have one eye on midweek. They are back in Champions League action. They were disappointed with their start against Man City. They're back in midweek action. Will they have one eye on that? You never know. It could be, I think, the chance for Milan to maybe put a claim down, because I think we're still in Serie A trying to find who Napoli's challenge is going to be, or who the challengers for the title are going to be. It's one of the reasons why I love the league at the moment, is because it does feel wide open. It feels like a bit like an American sports league where you can make a case for 7 or 8 sides. I think you can still do that in Serie A. Like I say, Napoli haven't clicked. There's been stutters. They've threatened to click. They've threatened to get things into gear, but there seems to be a missing piece or a breakdown in communication. Milan, maybe without the distraction of Europe, could be a team that creep into that conversation. Also on Sunday and Monday, the Rome clubs are back in action. It would be wrong of me to overlook last week's Rome derby, because, as always with the Rome derby, it had a bit of everything. Matteo Guendouzi got sent off. There's a shock, as Lazio were reduced to 9 men. But I think the overall story of the game will be missed opportunity for Lazio. This wasn't a game where Roma were dominant. This wasn't a game where Roma were playing them off the park. And how Boulaye has missed that chance, only he knows. That may be the difficulty with Lazio this season. I've said it before. I think their squad is not paper thin, but I think it's thin on the ground. And I think that they are potentially, without Europe, they're going to struggle to attract players. And I think they're struggling for goals. And I think that's an obvious one. I think both Rome clubs are going to struggle for goals. Roma have got Verona, who will be buoyed by that point against Juventus from last weekend. With Roma, again, a little bit like Milan, I wonder whether it's clicking with Gasperini, or whether things are just starting to get going, get the ball rolling, or whether that's going to be how they look this season, whether they are going to be inconsistent. You never know. They won midweek against Nice away. I know there was trouble before that game, but that's a great win for them. Again, a Europa League competition where they'll be looking at and thinking, we can go deep into that. You know, England's representatives are Forest and Aston Villa. They're not heavyweights, or they're not European heavyweights. Look, I don't want to slag Forest and Villa off. I'm a Forest fan. But they're not experienced in Europe in recent years. Roma are. Obviously, Celtic are in there. Red Star are in there. There is some big sides there. Porto, Red Bull Salzburg. But I think Roma will look at it and again be thinking, we've got a chance here to win this. Does their focus then become on that? A little bit like what Spurs and Man United did earlier in the season. Or last season, I should say, sorry. You never know. Inter Milan go away to Cagliari on Saturday night, 8:15 kickoff. Interesting story coming out of Inter. I watched the game on Sunday night against Sassuolo. I thought they played really well at times. I thought they looked very defensively open. I get the impression this is going to be the Inter under Christian Chivu. I get the impression that this is going to be what we're going to have to get used to watching. Sassuolo had chances, as did Inter. It was actually a very good game in terms of the chance that were created. Obviously, Inter get the goal in the 81st minute. Carlos Augusto takes the shot. It deflects, horribly wrong foots the goalkeeper. And then Sassuolo strike back 2 minutes later, and you're thinking, hang on, we've got a game here. Martinez's save off the header from Pinamonti earlier, I think it was in the second half. There's the point, Martinez's save. No Jan Sommer for Inter Milan. Is that an indication? I said quite publicly after last week's Coppa Italia and in midweek, I thought he looked a shadow of his former self, Sommer. Is this Juve again trying to lessen the age of the squad and basically saying, look, we're going to get rid of him. We don't want older players anymore. You don't know. Di Marco looked quite good against Sassuolo, which is a positive with Inter. I may end up again. It feels like every prediction at the minute I make, I end up with egg on my face. But I do wonder with them where it's going to go. I feel like they're going to be a very inconsistent side this year. I fully expect them to win on Saturday night against Cagliari. But, yeah, you wonder where they, I don't know, you wonder where they're going to end up and where their priorities lie. I said earlier, I said to someone at the weekend, they're not going to win the Champions League. They're not there at the moment. Is top four their aim? Is that an insult to them after what they've done the last few years? I can't work out. But again, I thought the way they looked against Sassuolo, the Inzaghi sides of the last few seasons, they are not letting Sassuolo have that many chances. And that may be just teething problems with Christian Kiewic's style, or maybe that's just an indication of where Inter are at the moment. Like I say, it's a big weekend. There's some fantastic fixtures on. Panama playing on the Monday night. They're quietly having quite a solid start for themselves. It's going to be a great weekend as always. Thank you very much for joining me for Calcio Corner. Please go check out the channel and please like the content. Please subscribe to the channel. I think you guys is greatly appreciated. Thank you very much. As always, have a good evening and thank you for joining me.